לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם יעשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורות ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו ושכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם האמת. All right, gentlemen, יש לי כוח.
Page 158 now in the middle of the page, the passage introducing the Shacharit Amidah, Tehilot Le'el Elyon.
Tehilot Le'el Elyon, Baruch U'Barach, Moshe u'Miriam u'Bnei Yisrael echanu shira, בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אליהם שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Let's stand together.
צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופתחנו ממך יהודה וישראל. גו עלינו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We begin the Amidah together, 159.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu,
Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים,
וקונה הכל,
וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם פוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדם מלך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני לחיי המתים.
יקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמעתי שמתו ושמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקורא זה אל זה ויאמר.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר. קדוש, קדוש, קדוש,
אדוני צבאות.
מלך כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך
כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ימקום חמקנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי בחגיב אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתגדל בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור לנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. על ידי דוד משיח צדקך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור, נגיד גדלך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גדלך. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך נקדיש. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גדלך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גדלך. ושפחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גדלך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גדלך. כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
The traditional words of the Amidah continue on 162, the fifth line, Yismach Moshe. Please do continue with the prayers of your heart, with the meditations, or with the traditional Amidah. Page 165, at the top of the page, the priestly blessing, and then the prayer for peace in our world. And I just want to say that on this Shabbat, when the possibility of war and conflict in Europe is rearing its head, we pray that war be avoided. This has been the goal since World War II, not to have land wars once again in Europe. We are at a critical moment right now. Page 165, the priestly blessing, and then a prayer for peace.
Eloheinu, Eloi Avoteinu, V'acheinu v'bracha b'shulashet, v'atoraktu v'yedei Moshe Avtecha, Hamura mipi Aaron v'anav kohanim, Yerashecha k'hamur, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha,
Ken Yehi Ratzon,
Adonai v'navinecha v'chuneka,
Ken Yehi Ratzon,
Yisa Adonai v'navinecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Sim shalom, sim shalom tova uvracha v'olam, sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, yal kol Yisrael amecha, v'archeinu avinu kulanu ke'echad, ve'or panecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha v'olam, sim shalom tova uvracha, ki ve'or panecha natata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Torat chaim ve'ahavat chesed, staka uvracha ve'rachamim ve'chaim ve'shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha v'olam, sim shalom tova uvracha, etov be'einecha levarech et amecha et amcha Yisrael, bechol eit ubechol shah bishlomecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha v'olam, sim shalom Tova uveracha, Baruch atah Adonai, Hamvarech et amo Yisrael, Bashalom.
Please be seated. The Kaddish Shalem marks the transition from Shacharit to our Torah service. Page 167, Kaddish Shalem.
All right, go ahead. Why don't you take a seat? I think we're good. יתגדל ויתגדל שמי רבי, אלמד יברח, כרותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וימכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו, אמן, יהי שמי רבי מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא וירדה ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשם, לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. תתקבע צלותון ובדון דכל ישראל קדם אבוהון די בשמיא ויאמרו יהי שלום רב מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
Amen. Good morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to everyone joining us online and in person here. This week, Parshat Tetzaveh, is always the week of the Yortzeit of Moses. This is the week when we recall and remember that this was the time when Moses went up to Har Nebo and died not having entered the land of Israel. And what is striking about Parshat Tetzaveh is that it is the only parsha in these last 4 books of the Bible where Moses' name is not mentioned. So it's sort of interesting that we both recall Moses and his role, and his name is erased from the text this week. I want to go back for a second to the problem of conflict amongst brothers in the book of Genesis. We often say that the book of Genesis tells stories over and again of brothers who were fighting each other, going back to Cain and Abel all the way through Joseph and his brothers. And then when we finally get to Aaron and Moses and Miriam, finally we have siblings who are working together and are not in conflict. However, the story is a little bit more complicated than that. When Moses and Aaron go before Pharaoh, gradually Aaron, who starts off as Moses' support and equal in negotiations, Aaron then disappears from the scene and Moses becomes the main interlocutor for Pharaoh. So too in this week's Torah portion, we're told who is going to be running the tabernacle, who's going to be running the Mishkan. And we are told Moses will no longer have a role. That Moses, who offered sacrifice in the earlier parts of the story and who built the tabernacle under his supervision, he's not going to get to work there. He's not going to have a role. So now we are told numerous times in this week's Parsha, Aaron, your brother, sort of reminding us of conflict amongst brothers and also reminding us of that brotherly bond. But Aaron is the one who is now going to be running the temple, not you. So I guess I wanted to just put out there the question, have any of us experienced what Moses is going through in this week's Torah portion? You built something up, and then you were told, yes, your job was to build it, your job is not to run it. That we're going to be turning over to somebody else, in fact, your brother. Would that lead to some sort of jealousy? Would that lead to some concern? Where am I in this? What's happening? Or did Moses move easily into the idea that leadership needs to be differentiated? I am now going to be the political leader, and Aaron and his children are going to take over the leadership of the temple and of worship. I want you to notice one other thing here. Aaron is told, you and your children will run things in the tabernacle and then in the temple. How about Moses? Who does Moses turn over political leadership to? Not to his children. He turns over political leadership to Joshua. So once again, another thought that we might have here that might be behind the scenes is Moses coming to terms with the fact that his legacy will not be through his children's leadership, but his legacy will be in the way that Moses is remembered as Moses, our teacher. So I wanted to offer those introductory words as we turn to this very interesting Torah portion of Tetzaveh, page 168 in the Siddur. We begin Ein Kamocha now, the service for taking out the Sefer Torah. Ein Kamocha.
Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein k'maasecha, malchutecha, malchut olamim, u'memshaltecha v'chol dor v'ador, Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachamim heitiva v'yirtzonecha et Zion tivnecha mod Yerushalayim ki v'cha levad batachnu melech El Ram v'nisa Adon olamim. Vayehi mitzaron vayomer Moshe kuma Yafutzu oivecha veyanusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzeh tahora ki mitzion tetzeh tahora udevar Adonai Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael Ikdushato Baruch Shmid Mehera.
Page 170, towards the bottom, Be Ana Rachetz.
Be Ana Rachetz, Velish Me Kadisha, Kadisha Yakira, Anai Madush Bechan. Be Ana Rachetz, Be Ana Rachetz, Velish Me Kadisha, Kadisha Yakira, Anai madush bechan Yerava kadama Tetiftach libi bioraita Vetashlim mishalim delibi veliba dechol lamach Yisrael letav ulechayim velishlam. Amen.
Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael
Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Echad Eloheinu
Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Gad Elul Adonai Iti Unero Mema Shemo Yachdav Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'adam Raglav Kadoshu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Hakadsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Please be seated, everyone. Of all of the objects that were in the Mishkan, there's one object that we are told the children of Israel already had. They didn't need to make it. They just needed to make a pouch for it. And that was the Urim and Tumim. What were the Urim and Tumim? They were some sort of dice, two blocks that if you pulled one out of the bag, the answer to the question would be yes. And if you pulled the other object out of the bag, the answer to the question would be no. So the Urim and Tumim were clearly something that were magical, that were sort of the magic 8-ball of their time, and that those were something that existed, and Moses is now told, make a pouch for it, and the high priest will keep it. So how did the tradition understand what the Urim and the Tumim were? There is an understanding that the Urim and the Tumim, these two blocks that were kept with the high priest, represented the two sources of knowledge, reason and revelation. The idea that it was balanced, that you needed both, that we need in life that which the human mind can imagine and understand, reason, and that which comes to us from tradition, that which comes to us from the world of spirituality and from, again, revelation. So Yale University and Brandeis University both use the Urim and the Tumim, lux and veritas, light and truth, as the symbols on their seals because of exactly that point, that science without the balance of tradition is likely to falter, and tradition without science also is unstable. So how do we balance those two? So I just want to put that out as a thought this morning. It is such an issue in our world today. What is the role of religion and religious leaders and religious thought in the political and scientific spheres, and what is the role of science in the religious sphere. The Urim and the Tumim point to an idea of balance. Our reading is going to begin on page 513, and our young people, if you guys would also take out a Bible. The opening part that we're going to recite this morning is about how the priests were sanctified. And we are told that there was an animal that was sacrificed, and a little bit of the blood of the animal was put on the right ear, the right hand, and the right leg. What's that all about? First of all, why the right rather than the left? Again, in tradition, the right is considered the stronger side for the lefties amongst us. Please do not take offense at this, but it is just the metaphor that the right side is the stronger. But why is it, and kids, think about this with me just for a moment. Why is it that the three places where the priest was sanctified were the ear, the hand, and the leg? It's as if it's saying to be a leader, you need three traits: a listening ear, a hand that directs your actions in the right direction, and also that your movements be in the direction of bringing about peace and safety for yourself and for your community. The ear with which we hear, the hand with which we do, the leg with which we move. All three of those were sanctified in this opening scene that we're going to be reading today in the middle of Parshat Tetzaveh. So once again, our reading now takes us to that moment when Aaron and his family changed from being common Israelites to being the eternal priestly family of Israel.
ויעזור ויגן וישל לכל החוסים בו ונאמר
אמן.
אמן. הכל הבו גודל אלוהינו תנו כבוד לתורה תעמוד. ליבה בתיה בת הרב אדם אפרים ומלכה אליסה לעלייה הראשון במקום הכהן.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Hanai Baruch Le'olam Vahed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. ולקחת את האל השני ושמח אהרון ובניו את ידיהם על ראש העיר ושחטת את העיר ולקחת מדמו ונתת עד חיל אוזן אהרון ידנו חוזן בניו הימנית ועל בון ידם הימנית ועל בון רגלם הימנית וזרקת את הדם על המזבח סביב ולקחת מן הדם אשר על המזבח ומשמן המשחה ועשית על אהרון ועל בגדיו ועל בניו ובגדי בניו איתו הקדש ובגדיו ובניו ובגדי בניו איתו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Our reading continues on page 514 with verse 22.
That's what I get for
Baruch hu et Adonai hambarach.
so much better.
Baruch Adonai hambarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. ולקחת מן העיר החלבה אל הים ואת החרב המכסה את הקרב ואת יותרת הכבד את שתי הגליות את החלב אשר עליהן את שוק הימין כי אל מילואים הוא וחיכה לכם אחת וחרד לכם שמן אחד ורקיק אחד מסל המצות אשר לפני אדוני ושמת הכל על גבי אהרון ועל גבי בניו הניבת אותם תנופה לפני אדוני ולקחת אותם מידם והקטרת מזבח על העולם לריח ניחוח לפני אדוני אישהו לאדוני.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tachenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein ha'torah.
Our reading continues with verse 26 on page 514.
Ya'amod Moshe ben Yisrael l'aliyah hashlishit.
Baruch hu es Adonai hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamavarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.
Asher
Asher
Bachar Banu
Baruch atah haolam. Asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim v'nosan lanu es toraso. Baruch atah Adonai nosein ha'torah.
Amen. ולקחת את החזה ואל המילואים אשר לאהרון והנפת אותו תנופה לפני אדוני והלך למענה וקידשת את חזה התנופה ואת שוק התרומה אשר הונף ואשר הורם מאל המילואים אשר לאהרון ואשר לבניו והיה לאהרון ולבניו לך כל העם מאת בני ישראל כי תרומה הוא ותרומה מאת בני ישראל מזבחי שלמיהם תרומתם לאדוני ובגדי הקודש אשר לאהרון יהיו לבניו אחריו למשחה בהם ולמלא בם את ידם 7 ימים ילבשם הכהן תחתיו מבניו אשר יבוא אל אוהל מועד לשרת בקודש.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bacha banu asher nosan lanu toras emes v'chayei olam natan b'sochenu. Baruch atah Adonai nosein ha'torah.
Amen.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba.
Amen.
Amen.
Yom ha'divra kirtei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon u'yomechon u'chayei devol Beit Yisrael Bagala Uvizman Karev V'yimeru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach V'yolam Yom Me'omaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yipar V'yirman V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitala Shmei Dekudasha
Brichu.
Elam in kol berchata v'shihirata
Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiram v'yolamav Yemeru. Amen.
Before the prayer for healing, just one last note on the Torah portion. If you'd look at page 514, every sacrificial animal was divided into 3 parts.
2 pages.
The breast part, where most of the meat was given to the sacrificer. The right thigh, which was where the filet mignon is, the best pieces of meat, were given to the priests. And then there was part of the animal that was burned up and given to God, as it were. And what is that part? The tail, the fat over the entrails, the protuberance of the liver, and the kidneys with fat on them. In other words, the part that in general people did not want to eat was in fact God's favorite part, and that was given to God. The sacrificial system was a perfect economic system in which the sacrificers were able to get a fleishik's meal, the priest who did not own land was fed, and God enjoyed the sweet smell of those fats and other parts of the animal which were not useful to human beings. So it's worth noticing how the system did all fit together. I'm going to take a moment now to offer some prayers for healing. I do just want to mention that I will include my own names in this prayer. I banged myself up pretty well a few days ago, and it's starting to look very dramatic, much more dramatic than it feels. But I know after warning everybody, please do not slip and fall, there I went and banged my head. So in any case, just wanted to mention that. And unlike the questions I've already been asked, this has nothing to do with conflict between me and my beloved spouse. Amisha Berach for Cholim. Misha Berach Avotenu V'imotenu Avraham Yitzchak V'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel V'Leah Hu Yivarech V'Yirape Et HaCholim Yekutiel Zelik Halevi ben Devora Yisrael ben Mira HaKohen Judy Hirschman Abigail Bataniel Luis Ferrando Chana Sima Bat Chaya Leah Dr. Iris Sherman Stacy Megalitis Susul Basha Bat Chaya Dina Michelle Langmead Masha Sima Bat Chaya Dina Bashia Kos Joan Leland Rachel Bat Shmuel Vester Halevi Chaim ben Herschel Binyamin, Louise bat Shena Pesel, Chaya Zittel bat Miriam, Leah bat Basha Mordechai, Yosefa Adina bat Basha Sarah, Ruby Etta bat Mariasha, Roger Cohn, Walter Dorr, Gerald Katz, Yisrael Dove ben Sarah Eshka, Sarah bat Sarah Imenu Risha, Kayla bat Sarah Eshka, Monica Burton, Meir Eliyahu ben Basha, Yehudit bet Selma, Velville ben Sephora, Eva Stovacek, David Mordechai ben Moshe, Arlene, Jerry Levine, Brenda Yehudit bat Sarah, Aryeh David ben Tova, Viet,
Julie Kagan, Victor Semino, and Ronald Butler.
Jeff Miller, Jeff Darnson, Jeff Levy, Jeff Christian.
We also include in our prayer all of those whose names are in our hearts and minds, and those in the hearts and minds of the people joining us online. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleihem, may God have mercy on them. Lachzikam ulurapotam, to strengthen them and heal them. V'yishlach lehem refuah shlema min hashamayim, refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf. Our prayers include prayers for mental well-being as well as physical healing. V'toshar hacholim, together with all those who are ill. V'chazek et yidei haoskim b'tzorcheichem. And also, God, strengthen the hands of all of those who are our caregivers. Shabbat hi milizok refuah krova lavo, hashtoba galov izman karov, v'nomahar amen. And once again, as the total number of deaths in our country approaches 1 million, we just take a quiet moment on this Shabbat to recall the losses of the last 2 years, losses that have been so comprehensive, so throughout our culture, and have not yet been fully mourned. So we ask God that this Magefa, this plague, cease, that we do our parts to ensure health and safety moving forward. V'nomar, Amen.
Yamod Hamagbiya Ta'amod Hagolelet. Please rise.
Ezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei Yisrael al pi Adonai yad Moshe. Torah, 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 tzivat lamnu Moshe. Torah, 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 tzivat lamnu Moshe. Torah, 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 tzivat lamnu Moshe. Torah, 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 tzivat lanu Moshe. Morasha kehilad Yaakov, Morasha kehilad Yaakov, Morasha kehilad Yaakov, Torah tzivat lanu Moshe. Yashikoach, please be seated, everyone. The Haftorah for Tetzaveh comes from the final chapters of the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel probably never was in the land of Israel, but towards the end of his prophetic account, he gives a vision of what the temple might look like when the temple was rebuilt after the Babylonian exile. What is fascinating, what scholars look at here, is that Ezekiel's temple would not really have fit on the platform in Jerusalem. And some of the laws of the temple and its design differ from what it says in the book of Leviticus. And that is one of the ways in which, from a scholarly historical perspective, we come to understand that the book of Leviticus might in fact have been written later than the prophetic writings. So it's an interesting insight, but I think what is most powerful here is how he envisions a building that both will be a focal point for moral development amongst the people Israel, as well as their worship. The cantor will begin with the preliminary blessings, then page 520 from chapter 43 of the book of Ezekiel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam
אשר בחר בנביאים טובים ורצה בדבריהם הנאמרים באמת. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו ובישראל עמו בנביאי האמת והצדק. אתה בן אדם הגד את בני ישראל את הבית ויקלמו מעוונותיהם ומדדו את תכנית. אם נכלמו מכל אשר עשו צורת הבית ותכונתו ומוצאיו ומובאיו וכל צורותיו ואת כל חוקותיו וכל צורותיו וכל תורותיו הודעותם וטוב לעיניהם וישמרו את כל צורתו את כל חוקותיו ועשו אותם. זאת תורת הבית הראש ההר כל גבולו סביב סביב קודש קדשים. הנה זאת תורת הבית ואלה מידות המזבח במות הממה והתופח וחיק המה והמרוחב וגבולה את שפתה סביב זרת אחד וזה גב המזבח ומחיק הארץ עד העזרה התחתונה 2 אמות ורוחב אמה אחד ומהעזרה הקטנה עד העזרה הגדולה 4 אמות ורוחב המה ואחר אל 4 אמות ומהאריאל ולמעלה קרנות 4 והאריים 12 אורך ב12 רוחב רבוע אל 4 רבעיו והעזרה 14 אורך ב14 רוחב אל 4 רבעיה והגבול סביב אותה חצי המה והחגלה אמה סביב ומעלותיהו פנות קדים. ויאמר אלי בן אדם כה אמר אדוני אלוהים אלה חוקות המזבח ביום העשותו לעלות עליו עולה ולזרוק עליו דם ונתת אל הכהנים הלוויים אשר הם מזרע צדוק הקרובים אלי נאום אדוני אלוהים לשרתני פר בן בקר לחטא ולקחת מדמו ונתת על 4 קרנותיו אל 4 פינות הזרה אל הגבול סביב וכיתת אותו וכיפרתהו ולקחת את הפר החטאת ושרפו במפקד הבית מחוץ למקדש. וביום השני תקריב זריזים תמים לחטאת וכיתו את המזבח כאשר כיתו בפר בחלותך מחטא תקריב פר במקר תמים ועיל מן הצאן תמים והקרבתם לפני אדוני וישליכו הכהנים עליהם מלח העלו אותם עולה לאדוני 7 ימים תעשה סיר חטאת ליום ופר במקר ועיל מן הצאן תמימים יעשו 7 ימים יכפרו את המזבח ותיארו אותו מילאו ידיו ויכלו את הימים ביום השמיני ועלה יעשו הכהנים על המזבח ועל עולותיכם ועל שלמיכם ורציתי אתכם נאום אדוני אלוהים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם צור כל העולמים צדיק בכל הדורות האל הנאמן האומר ועושה מדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ונאמנים דבריך ודבר אחד מדבריך אחור לא ישוב ריקם כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי היא בית חיינו ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני, משמח ציון בבניה.
אמן.
שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך מלכות בית דוד משיחך במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו על כיסו לא ישב זר ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו כי בשם קדשך נשבעת לו שלא יכפה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ותפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen. Yasher Koach. We continue now back to our Sidurim, to our prayer books, page 177, the prayer for our country. Phil will lead us. We'll read the 3 paragraphs of the prayer responsively.
Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessings upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them to understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land.
Adonai, God whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land.
May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth. And may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn any more. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Hatikva. Let's stand together. Page 448 if you want to follow.
Kol ohot bevaleva benima alefesh Yehudi ovia ufase
Liotam Chovshi Be'artzeinu Eretz Zion V'Yerushalayim. Thank you. We remain standing. The Sefer Torah is lifted. Yahalalu, page 183.
Actually, don't. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai ki niskas shemo levado hodo al eretz v'shamayim vayarem keren le'amo tila lechol chasidav Livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Vayechesof Yerod vechalo kulo merkavod. Adonai lamabul yashav. Vayeshev Adonai v'rech le'olam. Adonai os le'amo yiten. Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Uvnucha yomar. Etz Harayim hi lamasikim ba etomcheha meyushar deracheha darcheinoam vechol netivoteha Shalom Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu
Please be seated, everyone. Last week, we did something a little bit different during our Torah reading. We chanted some of the Torah reading in English using the traditional trope marks. And I think we mentioned this, but if you do type in the words transtropolation into Google, you'll get to a website where you can actually take a look and see multiple parts of Scripture with the trope markings in English translation. So I wanted to supplement that teaching today with a couple of texts about praying in languages other than Hebrew. Because we know that 2,000 years ago, the Jewish community did read the Bible in Greek and did offer some of their prayers in Greek. So what was that all about? And what sense did people have? First of all, there was a sense that Hebrew was not the only sacred language, that Greek also could be a sacred language, and in fact that the Greek translation of the Bible was done in a way that was miraculous. Some of you might know the story of the Septuagint, the translation of the 70. The date in the year when we celebrate the Septuagint, International Septuagint Day, was actually last week. I don't know if you celebrate it or not, but it is actually a date in the calendar. And it references the date when the Christian Roman Empire told the Jewish community, we'd actually prefer
if you read the Torah in Greek rather than reading it in Hebrew. Why was that? Because the Greek translation had been taken on by the church. But where did the sacred nature of the translation come from? It comes from a story that says 70 scholars were brought to the library in Alexandria, Egypt. The library in Alexandria was the greatest library in the world, in the ancient world. It contained one copy of every book that was considered important anywhere in the world. Unfortunately, it succumbed to fire, but at one point, it was the most amazing collection of books. So they brought 70 scholars from the land of Israel. They locked them up in 70 rooms, and they each came up with the same identical translation. That's the story that is told. And it's a story that gives a sense of the miraculous even to the Greek translation. Because how is it possible that 70 scholars would independently come up with the same exact translation? But that is part of the story that we tell. So here is now a section from the Mishnah about the language of prayer. And I'm going to give you a list of things you can pray in English and things that need to be said in Hebrew. So think about what unifies each of these lists. The following can be said in any language: the reading of the Shema, the Amidah, and the grace after meals. And these are read only in Hebrew. The reading over the first fruits, the Arami Oved Avi that is read on Passover, the blessings and the curses section from the Bible, and the priestly blessing. So what unifies those things that need to be said in Hebrew, and what unifies those things that can be said in any language? Any thoughts about that? Yeah. So the Hebrew stuff is when God is speaking to us. Lisa made this point last week. Thank you. That is true. So when God says, here is how to pray, here is how to do the priestly blessing. When God says, when you go up with the first fruits, here are the words to say, God is giving us the actual words. So those words have a certain magic to them. But when it comes to the Amidah, when it comes to Birkat HaMazon, even when it comes to the Shema, these are passages where we are expressing our thoughts, our hopes, our concerns. And when we're doing that, it's important to speak in a language that you understand. Here is how the Talmud phrases that. If it is a request for mercy, one prays however one needs to. And that expression, a request for mercy, is in fact one of the code names for all prayer like the Amidah. Everything should be an expression of a desire for mercy. That also teaches you one other important thing about the Amidah. If in your Amidah you have not said something personal, you haven't really said the Amidah. The Amidah was never intended to be just the words on the page. There must be an element that comes from the heart, an element of spontaneity and of in the moment. When the cantor recites the priestly blessing, however, the cantor is channeling a blessing in language we were given from God. And here is one final passage from Sefer Hasidim from the 12th century. If you come across a person who doesn't know Hebrew and is God-fearing and wishes to have the proper intention, man or woman, tell them they should learn the prayers in any language they know, anything they understand, because prayer is only effective with an understanding mind. And if the mind does not understand, what possible effect could the words that come out of your mouth?
Therefore, it is best to pray in a language that you understand. So with that, I'd like to turn to an English meditation in our Siddur on page 188b. If you would take a look at page 188b. As I've mentioned before, in Siddur Lev Shalem, those of us on the editorial committee do not get our names written next to things we wrote unless what we wrote was published elsewhere and what we wrote was an original prayer. The prayer that I want to offer now as a miniature version of the Musaf Amidah was written by Rabbi Ed Feld, by Lisa's father, and Rabbi Feld was our general editor throughout this process, and he has the special capacity as a poet, which he is, to write poetry in both Hebrew and in English. Rabbi Feld was a little discomforted with the emphasis in the Musaf Amidah on animal sacrifice and the hope for a return to the temple. And what he imagines in this poetic accounting of Musaf is that we think of Shabbat as our Musaf offering. We think about holiness not just in space, but holiness in time. So I'm going to read now, as our Musaf Kavanah for this Shabbat, Ed Feld's Shabbat meditation for the Musaf Amidah. On this day of rest, the holy Shabbat, you are my shadow, a shadow completely enveloping me. My body moves within your spirit. May it be your will that I gather your spirit within me, so that you be my compass, pointing my way as my feet again touch ground and I move on. What a powerful set of images. God and Shabbat as the shadow that envelops me today, inspiring me to my true north, like a compass, giving me guidance for the week ahead as I prepare to move on. So once again, I just want to offer this as a suggestion to everyone. There is so much in our Siddur of alternative readings and ways of saying the Amidah. Do take advantage of that, and remember, every Amidah, weeknight and Shabbat, is an opportunity to open your heart and offer a spontaneous prayer. So with that, my friends, we will turn to the closing parts of our service today, beginning on page 204 with Ein Keloheinu.
Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemokenu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mi Kemokenu, Mi Halomenu, Mi Kemokenu, Mi Kemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Kemoshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Kotenu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shatiru, Avotenu, Achanecha, Et Kesorecha Samim.
Let's stand together, Olenu 205.
Aleinu l'shabeach Adon hakol,
Kedula Asher Bereshit Shelo Asanu Haratzon Velo Samanu Mishpachot Adama Shelo V'gor Aleinu Yechol Hamona V'anachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umodim Lifnei Melech Alchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu Nota Shamayim Ve'yosei La'aretz Moshav Yikaro B'Shamayim Himal U'Shchina Tuzo Begav Meromim Hu Eloheinu Einon Emet Malkeinu Evezulato Kakatu B'Torato Yadatayom V'hashevota el levavecha Ki Adonai hu Elohim B'shamayim mimal Ha'aretz Mitachan Einon Einon. כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. נאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. היום ההוא ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו Ushemo echad, Ushemo echad.
Please be seated. During the week to come, members of our community recall the Yortzites, the anniversaries of the deaths of Erwin Bender, Ruby Lipsky, Harold Martz, Anne Elizabeth Robinson Burlad, Saul Silberberg, Isidore Cutler, Chuck Race, Peter Snyder, Jacob Adler, Ruth Provisor, Robert Simons, Abraham Brockman, Michael Goldberg, Jenny Eisenberg, Herbert Stanley Levine, Mayor Rosen, Jerry Wittenberg, and Harry C. Orkin. The mourners and those who are recalling a Yortzeit stand together now for the Kaddish, page 207. Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shmei Rabbah B'Olma Divrach Yerutei v'Amlich Malchutei B'Chayechon uVyomechon uV'Chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala uVizman Kori v'Imru Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Li'olam Yomei Olmaya Yit Barach v'Yishtabach v'Yit Pa'ar v'Yit Romam v'Yit Naseh V'yit hadar, v'yit alev, v'yit halal, shemei dekudasha, brichu, li'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imeru, amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shmaya, v'chayim oleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom, oleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'meruhu, amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom to everyone online. I just want to mention we had a beautiful service last night led by our young children, the children in our religious school. It was a really nice experience, and the sanctuary was pretty full with all appropriate social distancing of parents, grandparents, and children, lots of grandparents online. It was really a lovely day, and Yasher Koach to our religious school teachers for that program.
Next weekend, Friday night, we are once again on Zoom as we continue to be for the time being. And Shabbat morning, we will have services here in the sanctuary as well as on live stream. In a couple of weeks, we'll have our next Shabbat morning service, which will also be on Zoom, when we have as a guest speaker Rabbi Nami Kelman, the Dean of the Rabbinical School at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. She will be joining us Saturday night, her time, 11:30 our time, for some teaching about her sense of the modern history of Israel, religious pluralism issues, and where things are going from here. So that will be at the end of the month of February on Shabbat. We're going to conclude now with Adon Olam, and then we'll make Kiddush and Motzi here, and I think we have some snack cakes and water in the back of the room. Everybody is encouraged to hang around and to wish one another a Shabbat Shalom. Page 211, Adon Olam.
Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefso kol azai melech shemo nikra e'acharei yichlot hakol levado yimloch nora vehu haya vehu hove והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשילו להכבירה, ולראשי אלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, את צורכב לי את שרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום מקרא בידו, אפקיר רוחי, בידי שן העירה, ועם רוחי הביאתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא.
Let's stand together.
כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש. על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו, צהריים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen. Chaim.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המוציא לחם מן הארץ.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Sure. If we can say why don't we repeat some of it in English? Right. I think that's what we're opening up the possibility of, is that we might, everybody's going to show the document. But also, it's
Do me a favor, though, get a text me.
yeah, but to sing it with this melody.
But not always. You gotta send me a text.
Right.
Do it tomorrow.
Of course, we're going to jump
That's the point. Bring a big piece because it's just us sitting here. Huh? Because I don't want everybody touching our phone. What? You can survive what?
Somebody survived like a long time with this, like somehow.
Yeah, of course. You know why? Because
Probably gained weight.
it's the rule of 3. You need 3 days for no water. You die without water. 3 weeks without food. So you definitely will.
Probably gained a lot of weight if you just
I make French toast with it. It's not really religious. It's a holy loaf of bread.
so you can't
You make a blessing over it. Pre-game events. You make a blessing over it, and then you're good to eat it. In Brookline? Yeah. 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 And did you like it? Still, that place has, that's the only place I've ever seen flat tire. They with flat tire. Ever see it? It's like a flat dough with like cinnamon sugar on the top. It's pretty good, I guess. I don't know. Missing something. But they call it flat tire. It's like this big.
Also, I asked my dad more about the Tali clip from my uncle, and it might have been in his Hebrew, I'm not sure.
Did I see it yet?
I showed you in Zoom with it.
Oh, okay, yeah, bring it in. Bring it in. If you want to bring it on Tuesday, you can. I'll take a look. Yeah. It would be nice to have that to wear. Like, it would be nice for you to be able to use that as family related. Spencer. Shabbat was long gone. I love this. Anybody who wears a Market Square, you know you're doing all right. You know,
Right.